I was treated unfairly my entire life because of my golden child sister. Finally, I claimed my sweet revenge. What if the people who were supposed to love you most not only tolerated your tormentor, but actively enabled them? Then try to hijack the most important day of your life. My family did. But on my wedding day, they finally got a taste of their own medicine. And trust me, it was delicious. You see, my entire life was a living, breathing advertisement for what happens when you have a golden child sister. My parents' favoritism wasn't just obvious. It was practically a performance art piece. If she accused me of anything, no matter how ridiculous, I was instantly guilty and punished. But if I had undeniable proof of her wrongdoing, oh, she'd get a slap on the wrist, and somehow I'd still end up getting scolded. It was a twisted magic trick they perfected. Every single one of my birthday cakes had to be her favorite flavor. Didn't matter that I hated it. They'd just beam and pretend they didn't notice me picking at it. They bought her more, took us where she wanted to go, even when the day was supposedly all about me. My sister, naturally, grew up completely spoiled, and I was her convenient punching bag. For a while, she mostly ignored me, which, looking back, was a blessing. But things took a sharp turn when we hit our teens. She started having trouble making and keeping friends. Was it because she was mean? I mean, probably. We weren't close enough for me to know the details, but her behavior definitely went downhill. My parents, of course, boasted about her supposed achievements, never mentioning a single flaw. Meanwhile, they'd highlight my flaws as teasing material at every family gathering. I only knew about her social struggles because we went to the same school, and it was impossible not to notice she was always alone, while I somehow managed to be pretty popular. That's when I became her new target. Instead of an occasional punching bag, I became someone she felt compelled to constantly tear down. She started accusing me and my friends of increasingly wild things. My parents ate it up. "They're not good people, according to your sister," they'd say. Or, "Why are you trying to leave us? Why can't you be like your sister and enjoy family time?" It was suffocating. My escape from total isolation came from my extended family. Most of them lived in the same hometown, and I was surprisingly close with my cousins, despite the age gaps. One day, at a family gathering, they invited me to something. I don't even remember what, but I just blurted out sadly, "I'm not allowed to go anywhere." When they asked why, my little kid self, raw and unfiltered, just said it, "Because my sister doesn't have any friends, so I can't either." Oh boy, that got back to the adults. Apparently, they tore into my parents later. I got grounded for a month for lying, but it was totally worth it. After that, they gave me a bit more leeway. My sister ended up changing schools. I guess the humiliation of the whole family knowing her social status was too much. My parents, of course, immediately obliged, even though it cost them more. She found friends at the new school, but the damage was done. Having tasted the power to mess with my life, and still furious that I'd exposed her, she never let me go. My life remained a minefield. Her new friends would come over and bully me, which my parents dismissed as light teasing. I never invited my own friends over because my parents were awful hosts, or my sister would accuse them of stealing, and my parents would believe her. My cousins, though, remained my sanctuary. My parents never dared to treat family badly. Then came my first boyfriend. I really didn't want to bring him home, but my parents insisted. At one point, we got separated, and he came back looking stunned. He told me my sister had cornered him, wearing some skimpy outfit, batting her eyelashes, and proceeded to tell him how awful I was and how amazing she was. He was so irked, he just ran off to find me. Of course, my sister told my parents a completely different story. He had tried to flirt with her, but she, ever the virtuous sister, had refused, for my sake. Guess who my parents believed? My jaw dropped. But then it wasn't just my jaw. They believed her. Again. Now, my boyfriend wasn't perfect, but I believed him immediately. Why? Because I was a resentful, moody teenager, suffering from a lifetime of unfair treatment. I hated my sister as much as she hated me. With that disclaimer out of the way, let's talk about looks because they hadn't been relevant until now. My parents were overweight and showed love through food, so my sister was also overweight. I, on the other hand, was always kind of skinny because punishment often included no treats or snacks. Obviously, weight isn't what matters, personality is. But my sister, even then, was rude and spoiled. Even her attempts at flirting were clunky because she'd never had to work for anything. Combined with the fact that even my self-conscious teen self knew she didn't look like some sexy model, there was no way I believed my boyfriend would cheat with her. My parents immediately forbade me from dating such a horrible boy. I tried to keep it secret, but it was impossible, and the relationship fizzled out. The same thing happened with my next boyfriend. My sister accused him of flirting. He refused her advances, and again my parents believed her. I tried pointing out the pattern, but they just decided I was incapable of making good choices and kept picking bad boyfriends. That relationship couldn't handle the Romeo and Juliet drama either. In high school, I ended up getting a reputation for being fine with making out, but refusing relationships. Thankfully, that never got back to my sister or my parents. During this time, my sister did bring one boyfriend home. He was paraded with pride. My parents spent every second telling me how wonderful he was and why I couldn't be like my sister and find someone similar. Until one day he stopped showing up and suddenly he was a conniving bastard who tricked my sister. Oh well, the unequal treatment just kept going. She had more spending money, much better curfews. She was free to go anywhere, anytime. I couldn't. If I pointed it out, my parents would say, because she's older. But when I reached that age, I still didn't have the same treatment. When I called them out, they denied ever saying that or claimed it was because I couldn't be trusted, using my sister's false accusations against my boyfriends as proof of my bad judgment. Time went on. It was my sister's graduation. She got into a college that wasn't particularly well regarded, and she had no scholarship. Again, because only her achievements were mentioned, I don't know which colleges rejected her. But I did know her grades were bad. It was cause for celebration. My good grades? What's there to celebrate? You always get those. My parents, naturally, made a huge fanfare, promising to pay for everything. I was just relieved she'd be gone. Not that it made my life easier. She still came home every other weekend, and somehow things would go missing from my room, or she'd invent some new issue to make me miserable. My curfews remained impossibly strict. Then, my mom came to talk to me about my impending graduation. I'm only a year younger than my sister, you see. Since we're paying for your sister's college, she explained, we have no money for yours. So it would be better if you just started working after graduation and waited until she finished. Then we'd see if we could afford something for you. Oh, and if I stayed home, I'd have to pay for all my own stuff, part of the bills and rent. I pointed out I could get student loans. Mom said yes except no. Because we're so caring towards you and you have such bad judgment, we will decide if a college is worth getting into debt for. I'm not sure how they planned to stop me from getting loans. But I didn't ask. Scholarships weren't even mentioned. They clearly had no idea what my grades were anymore and never believed in my capabilities anyway. I didn't bat an eye. Just a calm, okay. My mom looked stunned, like she expected a tantrum. But you know what? I had no tears left for them. I just said I understood their position, thanked them for caring, and that was that. My dad tried the same thing later, and I gave him the same emotionless response. You see, after a whole lifetime of their terrible parenting, I never had any expectations. I knew they'd find an excuse. I never believed they'd eventually pay. I had been preparing for this. I could barely go out, my friendships were slim, so I had tons of time to study. And study I did, because college was my only shot at freedom. The time came and I worked my ass off. I got a full scholarship, not to an Ivy League or a law or medical school, but a solid course at a decent college. Knowing my sister would hate it and try to get my parents to stop me, I put my achievement on social media immediately. At the same time, I told them, even forcing myself to thank them in the post. Now, they couldn't forbid me without having to explain why to the entire family. Initially, they were even a little proud, boasting about it. But then, I guess my sister got to them. They quickly changed gears, even asking me if I was sure I wanted to go. They let slip that my sister wasn't doing well in college, and since she was smarter and had better judgment, I'd supposedly suffer even worse. I obviously stuck to my guns. They weren't happy, but they couldn't do anything. College was my savior. I started being happy. I still contacted my parents and visited on holidays, but since they refused to pay for anything, I had a convenient excuse for not going home often: money. I made sure to avoid introducing any man to them. Meanwhile, my sister stopped going to college. I know she didn't graduate because, again, there would have been a huge fanfare. She moved back home, paying no bills, no rent. It's different, my parents said. She started working at the same company as my mom, thanks to my mom pulling strings. All of this was presented to me as a point of pride. And then, almost there, I promise, I met my husband. You know those people who say, if I were in that situation, I'd have done something. My husband is the type who actually does. I'm the type who's meek, a doormat in the moment, and then can't sleep at night wishing I'd said something witty or clever. I'm the person who cries when I'm angry. My husband, he claps back immediately. He loves drama, and he loves to resolve it. He's the kind of guy that if he doesn't immediately respond to a slight, you better start worrying because he's cooking up something much worse for revenge. He's the one who wanted me to post this story. People were baffled that I got together with him. But just because my upbringing had made me incapable of acting like him, it didn't mean I didn't like it. I adore that my husband does what I can't. He treats people well, as long as they do the same to him. When we discussed marriage, we both agreed we didn't care much for a huge ceremony, especially given our budget. We'd rather spend on a dream honeymoon to Europe. As for where to do it, his family was spread out and mine was still mostly concentrated in my hometown, so we decided to do it there. We weren't living too far off, so we could take long weekend trips to manage things, plus some work flexibility meant we could stay in my hometown for a bit if needed. We sent out the engagement announcement and saved the date for a few months later. At this point, my parents naturally demanded to meet my man. I wanted to grow a spine and refuse, but I was having a hard time. The distance had made me think maybe, just maybe, my parents weren't so bad. Well, my husband looked like I had canceled Christmas when I told him I'd at least make sure they were never alone with him. See, he had been getting ready for this. He even bought a high-quality recorder he could hide in his pocket. He was stoked, thinking of all the ways he could refuse my sister's advances, insult her, and then spread the recording to my family. So, off he went, alone and excited to meet them. He came back later, absolutely euphoric. Babe, you won't believe the awful things they wanted. We can screw them over so bad. There are so many possibilities. I was confused, desperate to hear the recording. But he smartly told me it was better to listen to him first, or I'd misunderstand. He told me that instead of flirting, my parents and my sister sat him down. After some grumbling about not being okay with him, my judgment, etc., they proclaimed they were willing to pay for my wedding. On one condition, my sister would walk down the aisle. My parents insisted she go first in a wedding dress. Their excuse? It wasn't okay for a younger sister to marry first. So, it was only fair if my sister at least had the experience of it at my venue, with pictures being taken, and she'd even have a cake later. My husband then jumped in. Hey, vengeful husband here. Hell hath no fury like a pro-revenge, instant karma, nuclear revenge lurker when his beloved is scorned. That said, as much as my wife, she's my wife now, paints me as this quick-witted dude, I admit my neurons all but short-circuited when those folks legit suggested that crap, like some sort of great gift. Even Troy would rather take in the horse a second time, methinks. Alas, after my brain rebooted, I did have a whole list of insults ready to spew out, but something in my soul whispered like the devil, "String these idiots along." So I said I needed to think, see how my wife, back then fiancé, would react. Then I ran out of there before I could give away my nefarious plans. Back to me, the wife. So, my husband sincerely recounted how my parents wanted even my wedding to be about my sister, with a grin on his face and the recording to prove it. I was shocked. The distance had softened how badly they treated me, and I honestly thought even they wouldn't go this far. Thankfully, my husband insisting on the angle of revenge helped me not spiral into a bad headspace. We had a blast thinking up ways to screw them over, from ridiculously outlandish to what we thought was feasible. We eventually called his much more level-headed brother. When we settled on a plan, having 2 venue addresses, giving them the wrong one, etc., his brother scolded us for it. While he acknowledged he'd never convince us to avoid retaliation, he at least showed us that something like that would be hard to pull off. Some of our other ideas were also at risk of getting us sued. So, we eventually settled for the most benign plan. Act like we agreed, but then hire security and don't let her in. Obviously, if that was all, it wouldn't be pro-revenge. The rest is mostly my husband's doing, but he wants me to do the honors, so here goes. Just important to mention, everything he did was previously discussed with me, and they were our mutual ideas. He went back to my parents and said he'd probed and thought I wouldn't be down with it. However, he didn't see the issue and, not wanting the family to fall apart, would be down to help them do it. He pointed out that I don't like conflict, so if I was surprised with it, I might not throw a tantrum in front of everyone. On the other hand, marriage is a big thing, so who knew if I'd lash out? Thus, he suggested a compromise. They'd help pay for stuff. This way, I would feel even more pressure not to say anything, as not only would we be public with our families there, but I'd be grateful for the help they gave. He said my parents looked shocked, and my grown sister literally started skipping with joy like a kid. So it was accepted. Importantly, my husband also claimed that due to some bad judgment and past boyfriends, these words were all my idea, and I'm so proud of using their words against them. I was distrustful and controlling, and liked to check his phone and stuff to ensure he wasn't cheating on me. As such, it was imperative that nothing of this plan was ever put in writing. For any discussion pertaining to my sister walking down the aisle before me, he'd go over to their house to talk. And so began the months of deception, where my parents and sister thought they were tricking me, while my husband and I were milking them. Rather than simply paying for the wedding, they lay low. Of course, my parents wanted input in everything, including some things that meant a lot to me, like the songs and color palette. My husband would convince them to let it go, to keep me in line. But since we never really cared for the ceremony to begin with, everything else was fair game. Or so they thought. Here's what we did. We'd go to check the drink and menu options, and then accept the lowest or second lowest priced option. My husband would then secretly take my sister there to try it out. Then he'd sigh and say, "It's a pity we don't want to abuse my parents' goodwill, so we won't get the best options." Cue my sister demanding my parents pay for the best. My parents would then tell me not to worry, and they'd pay for the most expensive option. The same was done with the photographer and flowers. My husband handed my sister a bouquet of the flowers we wanted, then sadly expressed how I wanted some other, tasteless flowers. Cue my parents telling me they wanted us to go with said flowers, and they'd pay for it. When it came to the wedding dress, we hit a minor snag. My parents wanted me to use a hideous dress. Okay, it wasn't outright hideous, but it wasn't my style and wouldn't look good on me. We had planned on saying yes, and then simply not using it, but my mom sent me a message about it, so there'd be proof. I said okay. We had to go with me, refusing to text and standing my ground. My husband went over there and said he'd see what he could do. My sister even suggested ruining my desired dress, so I'd be forced to wear the other one. He pretended to agree. During all this time, they kept communications outside of any text. We made sure that happened by having me reply to my sister whenever she tried messaging my husband. This solidified the uncontrolling and neurotic claims my husband was making, so they believed it and never risked anything in writing. Some people might not like the thought of their partner going around and talking badly about them to family, but I'm such a doormat that the thought of being painted as this controlling and dangerous person was extremely funny to me, and I egged him on to do it. I guess I have a warped sense of humor. Oh, and my sister did try to flirt with him, but he acted conflicted to really sell that he was with them. My husband would pretend to tell them things without my knowledge, but he never told them we hired security. It was truly funny. My husband and I, who had sincerely considered a courthouse wedding to focus costs on our honeymoon, ended up having this extravagant, expensive wedding and barely spent a dime. We called it back pay for emotional damages from my parents. I think my husband, okay, he just confirmed I'm right, was enjoying the whole trick more than planning our actual wedding. I didn't think it was possible to witness a guy beaming at the thought of wasting his entire Saturday discussing wedding details with his in-laws. But here we were. Soon the day came. The plan my parents, sister, and husband had concocted was to wait until everyone was seated. Since the bride always comes out late, they'd have my sister arrive at that precise time to avoid me seeing her and trying to stop it. She'd walk down the aisle, and by the time I heard what happened, it would be too late to do anything. As for my dress, we saved some leftover fabric from my alterations. My husband took that to my parents' place, my sister still lives with them, and showed them as proof he'd ruined the dress. Then he said he had to go back to me as I was raging, and he needed to calm me down. He told them he'd see them at the wedding. We made sure to keep our real security hidden initially. As the guests and my parents arrived, they only saw a woman with a list of names to check. Only after my parents had settled in did we bring out the actual security, a guy who looked like a bodyguard. We instructed him not to let my sister in and promised a generous tip if he kept our instructions confidential. Soon the moment arrived. My parents got a text that my sister was less than 5 minutes away. My dad signaled for the ceremony to start. My bridesmaids had been prepped to follow his lead, so they did without checking with me. After they all took their places, my dad stood at the entrance, waiting for me. During this, a friend, not in the wedding party, texted me to get ready, to avoid suspicion if my husband or bridesmaids started texting. This friend, my husband's ally, was as eager to stir drama as he was and didn't mind not being a bridesmaid. As soon as my dad took his position, the bridal song began. The doors opened and I entered. My dad looked absolutely stunned to see me. He tried to look behind me, his eyes darting, realizing something had gone terribly wrong. He couldn't see the venue entrance from where we were, so he had no idea what had happened to my sister. Then his phone rang. I saw the caller ID and it was her. He mumbled something, came up, completely abandoned me at the aisle and walked off. Gasps. Confusion. The friend who was in on the plan loudly asked, "What happened?" I lied tearfully and said, "He told me it wasn't supposed to be me there." My husband and I had agreed that if my dad abandoned me, I should say that to make him look as bad as possible. The tears weren't just acting. I was genuinely hurt and trying not to cry. The friend then loudly asked, "What did he mean by it shouldn't be you?" so that everyone could hear and spread it. Then she said, "I'll go and check," and ran off. We planned this so she could create chaos with the security and prevent my dad from returning to stop the ceremony. Eventually, my mom also left. At this point, my husband's dad quickly ran over and took my arm. He'd been forewarned he might need to. His desperate run to me made me smile. I walked down the aisle to whispers as people discussed what had happened. Some even left to check. When I reached my husband, all was well. He comforted me, joking that my sad face was so real I deserved an Oscar, and reassured me he'd deal with my parents for what they did. We got married without any further issues. My parents never came back. I noticed a lot of people leaving and returning during the party, but no one dared tell me what was happening. Someone whispered in my husband's ear, and he went out. He returned later with a thunderous expression, but whispered to me that he needed to go hide before he broke character and started smiling. It worked. Here's the summary from friends, family, the security guy, and my husband that I got afterwards. My sister arrived in a wedding dress. The security refused to let her in, as we had agreed. He told her she must be at the wrong venue because there was already a bride. Yes, we tipped him very well, as promised. My dad tried threatening him with the police, claiming he'd never heard of him, so he couldn't be working there. The security agreed to call the police since he was hired by us and was just doing his job. My dad realized it would be too late and tried to demand that he let my sister in. At this point, our friend came over, started shouting and insulting my sister and asking what was going on, basically stalling. My mom soon arrived, followed by others. By then, the wedding plan was ruined. All my parents could do now was damage control, as everyone who learned about it was horrified they'd try to pull it off. People started screaming and berating them. The three, naturally, said it wasn't a secret and blamed my husband. When he was called over, my husband put on his best confused look and denied everything. To quote him, "Gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss, LOL." He denied ever agreeing to such a ridiculous plan. When they insisted he demanded proof. And of course, they couldn't provide any. All the text exchanges they could show were about normal wedding decisions. My sister was screaming, crying, and apparently sat on the floor, kicking her legs like a child. My dad looked like he wanted to hit my husband, but security and other people held him back. Naturally, they claimed they had no proof because my husband had told them not to text. My husband laughed and said, "Wow, how convenient, huh?" Then he repeated, "Why would I ever agree to something so messed up?" He ripped into them about being terrible parents and said he wasn't going to let their stupid plans and lies ruin his wedding. Then he came back to me. No one believed them. The venue had cameras, but they wouldn't show me the recording as it was only for security purposes. However, some people filmed parts of it. Watching my parents and sister get torn apart by everyone who came out to see the drama was delightful. After years of being accused of things and not being believed, seeing them get a taste of their own medicine was one of the best wedding gifts. My mother was crying. My dad kept changing from purple to white, and my sister was still on the floor, crying and screaming. They kept insisting that my husband was in on it, but people kept asking why he would agree, why there was no proof, and why they wanted my sister to do this at my wedding. They had no good answers. Eventually, they were told to leave and had no choice but to do so. My dad apparently had to drag my sister up as she refused to leave the ground. Again, people said nothing to me all night. I guess they wanted to spare me, and maybe it's because I was the bride and not just a guest for once, but it did feel like everyone was making an extra effort to be nice, positive, and excited about everything. My husband says all the expensive food and drinks they were eating certainly helped, LOL. We had a blast. My husband kept up the forced, angry face for only a short while before breaking out in smiles again. After that, we went to the hotel to catch some sleep before heading off on our honeymoon. Speaking of which, my parents did try to pay for our plane tickets, but we thought that was risky as they could try to cancel them or something. So we refused. Since then, the three of them have tried to contact me. I've refused calls because my husband insisted on keeping a paper trail, a smart move because my sister eventually messaged me. I won't repeat what she said as it was very unhinged and didn't make much sense, but the important part was that she blamed me for her humiliation, called my husband a two-faced snake who fooled them for months. He wants to print and hang that on our wall, LOL, and hoped, but was also certain, that I'd get cheated on by him. She even suggested he was cheating on me with her. My husband took my phone, screenshotted the call logs, my sister's messages, and some messages from my parents demanding I pick up the phone, and sent it all to our family group chat. He also sent screenshots of messages to him where they called him names and threatened him. But he kept up the "you're delusional, I never agreed to anything" shtick, and even threatened to sue them for defamation and harassment. He wrote a message in the group chat begging my family for help as I was now being harassed by them constantly. He pleaded with them to stop my parents and sister from ruining our honeymoon after they failed to ruin our wedding. He ended with a request that they not share our locations to prevent my parents from sending my sister over, and claiming he had somehow agreed to pretend to sleep with her in our honeymoon suite. LOL. My family assured him they'd handle it, and since then we've had peace. My husband is a bit disappointed that my sister didn't disobey, so he could call her out again while tearing her a new one. We'll see if the peace lasts. All in all, while I would have preferred a normal, loving family at my wedding, at least for once in my life, they not only failed to ruin something meaningful to me, but I got back at them. Do I know why they treated me like this? I've been asked this question a lot, so I assume you all will wonder the same. I've pondered this all my life and still don't know. I tried asking when I was young, but they denied any difference and scolded me for being spoiled, so I stopped trying. I've considered many possibilities, but based on my observations, I think it's this. I was unplanned. They took a while to have my sister, so she was not only wanted, but also like a miracle child after so long. However, given our small age difference, I think they didn't expect to have another child so soon or easily and didn't use adequate protection after my sister's birth. Maybe they didn't realize my mom was pregnant until it was too late, so they were saddled with an unplanned baby while still dealing with a newborn. They're not well off, so having the extra expense likely didn't help and they resented me. But that's just my conjecture. Regardless, I've accepted that the reason won't truly matter. What they did to me was unwarranted, no matter what. And did they really think this would work? My husband and I have a theory that they never intended to do this at all. We think my sister threw a tantrum over me getting married, first when she barely gets dates, and they made my husband that outlandish proposition. They didn't want to pay for my wedding and didn't think we'd accept, or that it would even look good for them to do it. By suggesting it and being refused, they could look like the good guys to my sister while having an excuse not to give me a dime. But then my husband accepted it, and they couldn't backtrack without risking my sister turning on them. Honestly, sometimes I still can't believe it all happened. What would you have done in my shoes? Or better yet, have you ever pulled off a revenge plot this satisfying? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your stories.